So now we're going to work the edging of the belt. We've come to the last row of Tunisian crochet. Normally when you complete a row of your final row of Tunisian crochet on a project, you would finish the edge off with some standard crochet because you can see it's kind of open here. However, we're not going to bother doing that because our project is going to be covered up. The fastening that we're going to work will cover up that edge of the crochet. You can just about see it there. It won't be visible. It looks very slightly different to the end with the foundation chain. So we don't need to worry about that in this particular project, but that is a skill you will need to know if you want to make other Tunisian crochet projects. So in the normal way, we can just pull our yarn through and trim with scissors. And that's the end of our Tunisian crochet for this project. The edging is worked with a slightly smaller hook. I've used a 4mm hook for that, and I'm going to downsize. Normally you would downsize to a 3.5 hook, which is what I recommend. I know that I tend to chain slightly tight, so I'm going to be working with a 3.75 hook, which I think you can probably see there. That's an F hook if you're in the US. The rest of the piece was worked on a 4mm hook or a G hook. I'm recommending to work with an E hook or 3.5mm unless you're a tight chainer like I am. So I'm going to start by working the fastening, and you start with working with your piece wrong side facing. That's the wrong side of your Tunisian crochet. It looks a bit like a purl-sided knitting. It looks very much wrong-sidey to my way of thinking. And on the foundation chain, it'll be quite easy to see that you've got these V stitches going along here, and we'll be wanting to work a slip stitch into the back loop of each of those stitches along there. So I think that one's quite easy to do. I'm going to show you in comparison how to do it on the other end. You don't really have a back loop there, and so I'm counting this as the front loop and this as the back loop. So I'll be working into these parts of each stitch as I go along, and then I have to remember as well that the first loop on the hook counted as a stitch. So after I've worked into the one between the stitches, which belongs to this one, I'll also work into the chain, and then I should have my 21 slip stitches. We need a multiple of 4 plus 1 extra stitch to work the fastening. So that's what I'm going to be doing now. So make your slip stitch in the usual way. I'm using contrast yarn. Hopefully this kind of grey, bluey, purple colour should show up really nicely, and start in your back loop. So I'm treating this as my first loop and this as my back loop here. So I'm going to work a slip stitch in there, a slip stitch in the next one, all the way along. And then when you get to the last stitch and the loop on the hook, they're a little bit different to work, but you're going to do exactly the same thing. This strand will be loose because it's the one you've pulled through, so just make a slip stitch around that, and then also remember that first loop on the hook is also counted as a stitch, so you're going to work into there or you will not have your 21 slip stitches. So let's count the 21 slip stitches now. 1, 2, 20 and 21, and then we've got the loop on the hook. So we're going to turn this now, and we're going to be working into the front loop of each of those slip stitches with a UK half treble or a US half double. So let's use 2 chains to mimic that, or any other turning technique that you prefer. I know not everybody likes to use chains as their turning technique. And then we're going to work into the front loop of each of those slip stitches, and this will give us a really lovely crisp turn on our belt. I need to get some more yarn out of the ball. The half treble or US half double is worked by wrapping the yarn around the hook, working into the front loop only of the slip stitch. It's a little bit tricky, that's why I like pointy hooks. Pulling it back through and then removing all those 3 loops in one. Yarn round hook, through the front loop, use your finger to help you if you need to. Pull up the loop and remove all 3 loops together. Continue all the way along the row into each of those slip stitches. And then working into the last stitch. At this point you can check that you've got 21 stitches. You will definitely need a multiple of 4 plus 1 stitch. Don't forget that your 2 turning chains count as a stitch, if you're not familiar with that in crochet. So working up now, you're going to make those 2 turning chains in place of your first stitch, and then you're going to work a second stitch, a UK half treble or a US half double, same thing, different name. And then we're going to make a chain, and we're going to leave a space. We're going to leave the next stitch alone. We are going to work another 3 stitches, half trebles or half doubles, into the next 3 stitches. And you can see the eyelet is forming there. We're going to work a chain, miss a stitch or skip a stitch, as they would say in US written patterns, and work into the next 3 half trebles. Another chain here, miss this stitch and work into your final 2 stitches. Don't forget that those turning chains do count as a stitch. And finally work into the turning chain. So you can just slip a loop of that over there and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Now we're going to work a turning chain for the other side. You can do that before or after turning, and then we're going to work into the second stitch. Into the chain space, the eyelet, into the next 3 stitches, and again we're working half trebles or half doubles, no change there. Into the chain space, into the 3 stitches, and end up by working into the last stitch and the turning chain. Remember that that turning chain does count as a stitch. So that's the last of our stitches. Now we're going to turn and we're going to work a slip stitch into each of the stitches. It's up to you whether you work one into the end or not. I find that with some yarns you will need to and others you won't. This one is already slightly bulky, so I'm going to work into the next one already. Just try that corner and see how it looks. That is crisp enough. It's a nice square corner without working into the very first one. If you had a slightly firmer yarn or a thinner yarn, you might want to work into that one. It's one of those things you'd have to see by how it looks. So you're working a slip stitch into each stitch, and you can see that the stitch sits around the front and gives a nice firm edging. And you might also be surprised that we're working this top stitching on what looks like the wrong side of the belt. However, you will see in just a moment we're going to fold it over and this will become the right side of the belt now. In the pattern I've referred to it as the wrong side. And again, it's up to you whether you work into that last chain here, and again I'm not going to. We're now going to fold it over and place your eyelet section over the Tunisian crochet. And when this is sewn in place, you'll find you've got a nice sharp division between the Tunisian crochet and the fastening section, and you can see the eyelets there. Working into the eyelets is really helpful there, rather than working into the chains themselves. We should be able to fold the cord through quite nicely as well.